What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Irene, and I'm going to be running you guys through the only Volibear guide that you will ever need. With his rework hitting the live servers, it's about time we dropped a guide on how to play him. I do want to mention, however, that we have started a Discord server as well as a Reddit community. Make sure to check out the description below for links to join either or even both of them. As always, we also have to do our question of the day. Our question of the day is, what's a tip about a champion that you want other players to know about? My little tip is that when you're playing Cho'Gath, if your opponents are within execute range of your ultimate, there will be an indicator below them that kind of looks like jagged teeth surrounding them or even spikes. It's basically just saying, hey, you can eat this guy, and when you do, he'll die. Let me know what your tips are in the comment section below. A real quick disclaimer though, Volibear is bound to receive various balance changes following his release, so do note that some stuff we cover might change or become less relevant over time. Now with that said though, this is one of the most exciting reworks that's hit the live servers, so without further ado, let's get right into it. First up is the question we've all got to ask ourselves: why play the new Volibear? Here's why. He has the old Ohm Wrecker built into his kit, he's a tanky, high damage juggernaut, he's very easy to play, and finally, you're tired of the current top laners or junglers you're playing and you want something fresh. Let's run over his strengths and weaknesses next. For his strengths, he's a turret diving fiend. He has point and click CC, high extended fight damage output that comes mostly consistently, but also in some bursts, and he has lots of AoE damage. His weaknesses are that he's low mobility, although it's much better than he was before, extremely long cooldown ultimate, and a volatile first jungle clear. Next, we have to run through Volibear's abilities. Volibear's passive is very different from his old one. Basically, it's his old ultimate, but toned down a bit. In place of the high cooldown healing regeneration in his previous iteration, it's now an attack modifier as well as an attack speed buff. Anytime Volibear deals damage, he's granted a stack of his passive. Each stack provides him some extra attack speed, and once he maxes out at 5 stacks, his attacks will apply lightning strikes that deal bonus damage to the 5 closest enemies. Once again, this applies for every basic attack as long as he has 5 stacks of his passive. In order to maintain his stacks, Volibear must deal damage within 6 seconds. This passive is extremely important to Volibear's jungle clear, as well as his team fighting. 5 targets potentially means 5 enemy champions, and constantly dealing damage during teamfights means that his passive can really do work. During your jungle clears, you're going to want to minimize the time it takes to travel between camps. This isn't challenging by any means. 6 seconds is a very forgiving time frame, and it's quite easy to maintain your passive between camps. The only transition that isn't quite easy is between raptors and wolves. Luckily, dropping the passive isn't the worst loss, since stacking it back up is also quite easy. Nevertheless, making sure that you walk immediately from one jungle camp to the next will save you some time during your jungle clear. Unfortunately, Volibear does get quite low early on, but once you have both a Hunter's Machete and a Hunter's Talisman, you'll have plenty of sustain as Volibear's passive synergizes extremely well with the latter. Volibear's new Q is extremely similar to his old one. The biggest difference is that it now stuns his target instead of tosses them behind him. While this is a situational nerf, it's also a small buff. Stuns make it easier for your teammates to follow up on your crowd control, but more importantly, this change is also for himself. Volibear's E has gone through significant changes, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. When casting Q, Volibear gains some bonus movement speed, as well as the ability to move through units. While running toward an enemy champion, the movement speed bonus is doubled. Finally, one other significant change is this right here. If Volibear is immobilized before he's able to reach his target, he becomes enraged. The ability is reset, refunding its entire cooldown as well. Although Volibear remains somewhat immobile, this is a nice change and also accurately depicts my and most players' feelings when they're playing Volibear. No one likes it when their opponent stops them from clicking on their target, and this change should ensure that Volibear can have a meaningful impact in fights more consistently. This change is a big reason why having tenacity is so important on Volibear now. You want to break out of that crowd control as quickly as you can so that you can cast your Q again and continue chasing your opponents in a relentless fashion. Volibear's W, Frenzied Maul, is his bread and butter ability now. It's a single target burst spell with a somewhat low cooldown. When cast on an enemy, it deals damage to them and also applies on-hit effects. Enemies hit by this ability are temporarily wounded. If Volibear casts this ability on a wounded target, it deals bonus damage and also heals Volibear for a flat amount plus some of his missing health. Once again, this is an important ability for his jungle clear as well. When clearing camps with multiple monsters in them, you'll want to focus down some of them, while keeping one alive to constantly cast W on so that you can heal off of it. This same micromanagement applies during teamfights as well, where you're going to have to decide on what the best usage of your W is. When you need some more sustain, try to stay near immobile targets so you can continue healing off of them. Other times, you'll have to change targets for the extra DPS you receive from your W. Next up is Volibear's E, Sky Splitter. This ability has received a massive makeover, and we need to talk about it. This is now a ground-targeted ability that you have to aim. It covers a decent amount of space, but takes quite a while to actually finish casting. It's essentially like a very slow Xerath W. Targets hit by this ability will take some damage, as well as bonus damage based on their maximum HP. The bonus damage is capped against non-champions, so it's not as crazy as it could be for clearing the jungle. Enemies hit by this ability are also slowed, and if Volibear hits himself with it, he gains a shield equal to a percentage of his maximum health. The reason we talked about the Q change being good for Volibear is that it synergizes so well with his new E. When you cast Sky Splitter, it's extremely smooth. You don't cancel your movement, and you don't cancel your attacks either. You're able to cast Sky Splitter while chasing opponents down with your Q. If your opponents are somewhat far from you, a nice simple combo you can use is casting your E, using your Q to close the distance, and then flashing to stun and trap them in your E. It's pretty difficult to react to, and is an easy way to land your E for some extra damage. When you're close to your opponents, you can try to do the same thing without expending flash. Try to aim Sky Splitter so that your opponent will be at the center of it when it's cast, then follow up by stunning them in it. If your opponents are immobile, there's almost no way they can get out of it. Otherwise, you're able to force an opponent to either waste an ability or summon or flash to get out of it. Volibear's ultimate is Stormbringer. When cast, Volibear leaps a pretty sizable distance. Upon landing, he deals damage to enemies near and under him, and turrets are temporarily disarmed as well. As he levels this ability up, the duration of the disarm gets longer and longer. Upon release, the duration is 6 seconds when the ability is maxed out. 6 whole seconds of disarming a turret is absolutely insane. On top of all of this, once Volibear casts this ability, he gains the ability to move through units, extra health, and some extra attack range too for 12 seconds. This ability is intended to basically activate God mode for Volibear, but it's not as insane as something like Nasus's ultimate, for example. The reason for this is that a lot of the emphasis of the ultimate is placed on the fact that Volibear can nullify turret damage for a set amount of time. Stormbringer is Volibear's go big or go home playmaking ability. You can go for risky turret dives you wouldn't be able to with other champions, or attempt insane game-ending pushes as well. This ability hits all nearby turrets when landing, so if used at the enemy's Nexus turrets, you can cancel both of them simultaneously for a crazy final dive. Unfortunately, the Nexus obelisk is not cancelled by this ability. They had to put a stop to it somewhere. The distance of Volibear's leap is enough to jump through most walls. Even jumping through the wall beside an inner tier 2 turret is possible. Once Volibear hits level 6, he can get very creative with his gank pathing, whether he wants to go for a vanilla approach, flanking enemies with Q, or literally jumping headfirst into a turret and eating an enemy alive. The options are limitless with his ultimate. Like his E, if you want to ensure that you land Stormbringer for some extra damage, cast it as a follow-up to his Q stun. While it is definitely something that you can react to, the damage radius is large enough to force enemies that want to get out to use abilities or burn their summoner flash. As a final note, be creative with this ability. Use it to save allies, save yourself, or even use it during the middle of turret dives, rather than using it to initiate them. Don't limit yourself to a single play and think about the multiple ways you can use this ability. Sometimes you also need to run away with it. Stormbringer may have an extremely long cooldown, but if you can use it to avoid death or save summoner flash, it's pretty worthwhile to use it. With that all covered, let's run through Volibear's build. First, let's run through his jungle build. Our analysts believe that this is the role best suited for Volibear because of his new ultimate. You never know where it'll be most useful, so it's nice to put Volibear in a role that can go anywhere on the map. For stats, you want to run attack speed for offense, adaptive force as your flex, and whatever defensive rune you need based on the enemy team. As for your runes, you'll want to either use Conqueror or Aftershock as your keystone. Volibear's point-and-click Q makes it an absolute breeze to activate Aftershock. Even when interrupted, the cooldown is reset, so it's practically impossible to stop Volibear from stunning someone on the enemy team. Volibear also ramps up Conqueror stacks quite quickly and thrives in longer teamfights. The Aftershock rune setup is as follows: Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, then you take Nimbus Cloak and Celerity as your secondary runes. When it comes to Conqueror, you want to run the Conqueror Keystone, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity. For items, you want to start by building a Stalker's Blade with the Cinderhulk enchant, your choice of boots between Ninja Tabi, Boots of Swiftness, and Mercury Treads, then a Titanic Hydra, a Dead Man's Plate, Spirit Visage, and Righteous Glory. For his top lane build, we suggest running Conqueror as it's not limited by a cooldown. The stats are the same, but let's run through the runes and items. The runes are Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Coup de Grace, and then Bone Plating and Demolish. These are guidelines, but make sure to adapt to the opponent's draft. Unflinching is a great rune on Volibear, and so are many others like Last Stand, Presence of Mind, and even Conditioning. Alright, let's finally talk about playing Volibear. The early game is going to play out quite differently based on where you're playing Volibear. For jungle, start with a Hunter's Machete. Hunter's Talisman definitely feels nice, but it significantly hinders Volibear's clear speed. Since Volibear attacks quite quickly, you want to take advantage of the synergy between his passive, W, and Hunter's Machete for a faster clear. The one downside to taking Hunter's Machete is that Volibear is a mana-hungry champion because he spams his W over and over again. If you plan to full clear the jungle, expect to run out of mana by the time you're at Wolves if you started at your red buff. Volibear gets pretty low during his first clear if he tries to take every single camp. This is fine if you're in passive, farmy jungle matchups, but if you're afraid of getting invaded, our analysts suggest that you skip your Krugs. Go red buff, Raptors, Wolves into blue buff. If you want a level 3 gank as soon as possible, go red buff, Raptors, a single small wolf, in other words leaving the big wolf and the other small wolf alive, then taking blue buff for level 3, and immediately ganking an adjacent lane. Volibear's following clears after that are much easier. Once he finishes both jungle components or a Stalker's Blade, it's smooth sailing for him because of his passive. Choose your keystone based off of your jungle matchup rather than entire enemy compositions. Aftershock will help you brawl it out against champions with high burst damage, while Conqueror provides incredible sustained damage. Landing your E on both yourself and your opponent almost always leads to a favorable fight, so make an effort to do so. The good thing about Volibear is that his clear speed is quite fast because of his passive. Adapt to the game and act based on what you need to do. While ganking is ideal, it's not always possible, and hitting level 11 increases the duration of your ultimate's turret disabling properties. Investing in levels can lead to some incredible game-winning plays, so you can always default to that when good opportunities aren't available. As a top laner, things are a little bit different. Go for extended trades with your W whenever possible. It provides sustain and deals a decent amount of damage. Force your opponents to take longer fights against you and use your E as a baiting tool rather than an engaging tool. Volibear's E is basically the deciding factor for his opponents. When it's cast, that's the moment Volibear's opponents have to decide if they want to keep fighting or back off. By casting this ability to cut off opponents' escape paths, you can force them to commit to unfavorable fights. Once you hit level 6 as Volibear, you can also call for jungle assistance. The turret dives are what make Volibear so strong now, and you need to abuse this. Alternatively, you can push in your lane and tower dive the mid laner as well. Alright, so the mid and late game for Volibear is going to be identical regardless of what role you're playing him. There's one difference though, and it's macro play related. If you're playing top Volibear, make sure that you go into the correct side lane, of course, especially if you're running teleport. Make sure you're taking the lane that's furthest away from whatever neutral objective is on the map. Jungle Volibear is the opposite. Make sure to stay away from the furthest lane. The gameplay, however, is the same, and there's one word for you guys: dive. Please dive your opponents with Volibear. That's what he's designed to do now. At level 11 and 16, Volibear hits insane power spikes because of his ultimate's increased disarm duration. Players are used to being safe under their turrets. I mean, entire teams are used to being safe under turrets actually. Catch them off guard, pull the trigger, and look for dives. While A-ramming is almost never the best move, it's still a pretty decent one with Volibear specifically. The turret is not a safe place for your opponents when you play Volibear, so clear vision and try to catch your opponents off guard from the fog of war. Volibear scales decently, but not extremely well, because he still remains a rather immobile champion. But because of his new ultimate, he's in a much better place than before, however. Instead, the way Volibear scales is with his playmaking potential, so you need to be aggressive and go ham for those game-winning plays. That concludes this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want more content to help you improve, check out ProGuides.com, where we've teamed up with pro players to create guides designed to take your game to the next level. Also, keep an eye on our YouTube channel, where we're constantly updating it with new content just like this. Good luck on the Rift, and we will see you guys next time.